Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to all of you for today's session. And on behalf of the Embassy of India in Israel, the United Service Institution of India, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you, and to our speakers. Today's session is today's webinar is actually on a very interesting topic. We have a couple of very eminent speakers who will be talking to us about the legacy of General JFR Jacob and the other Jewish soldiers of the Indian Army. Now, I'm not going to introduce General Jacob. He is very well known, and in any case, our next speaker, Brigadier Apte, will be covering his life and his legacy at great length, and I don't want to eat into the speaker's times. But I will make a brief mention on India's association with its Jewish citizens. Now, as many of you are aware, in India we've had a very old settlement. There have been very old Jewish settlements. The Cochin Synagogue dates back over 2,000 years. And apart from the Cochini Jews, we had, of course, the Baghdadi Jews, a large number of them that were settled in the erstwhile Bombay Presidency, and of course in the city of Bombay, or Mumbai as it is now. And a number of them subsequently moved into Calcutta, and General Jacob, of course, was from this community. However, it's the third Jewish community, which were the Beni Israel, which are of particular interest to us as historians of the Indian Army, and who are actually unique amongst, I think, the entire Jewish diaspora, owing to the fact that they had a very strong presence in the Indian Army, and this presence far outweighed their strength in numbers, and they not only enlisted as soldiers in the Indian Army, but they were very successful. A very large number of them ended up in the senior-most positions that were then available, particularly in the British period. And the Beni Israel, incidentally, they date back, or their history in India dates back almost 2,000 years, and they have a striking similarity as far as their historical or their ethnological history is concerned with the community of our next speaker, that is the Chitpavan Brahmins, because both the Chitpavan Brahmins as well as the Beni Israel share this a story of a shipwreck on the Konkan coast that dates back to nearly 2,000 years. And both these communities have been outstanding in their association and with the Indian Army and their achievements with society. Our next speaker will be Ambassador of India to Israel, His Excellency Mr. Sanjeev Kumar Singla. And Ambassador Singla will deliver the opening remarks. He's a career diplomat, and he joined the Indian Foreign Service in '97, and he served in a variety of capacities on Indian missions abroad at Paris, in Dhaka, in Geneva, and at Tel Aviv. And he's also been at the headquarters in Delhi in the Ministry of External Affairs. And he was Deputy Chief of Protocol and as Director of Foreign Secretary's Office. And he served as the Private Secretary to the Prime Minister during August 2014 to August 2019. I will now request His Excellency to kindly give the opening remarks at this webinar. And my apologies for that slip up, sir. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you, Squadron Leader Chinna. I'm very happy to join this webinar being organized by the Indian Cultural Center of the Embassy with the help of United Services Institute to commemorate the legacy of Lieutenant General Jacob and other Jewish soldiers of the Indian Army. Though small in number relative to the size of India and the Indian Army, historically, Indian Jews joined the Indian military units since the British Raj times. As Squadron Leader Chinna mentioned in his opening remarks, their success outweighed the relatively small number they had. And during the First World War, it has been estimated that there were over 175 Jews serving in the million-strong Indian Army, and many of them went on to win military honors. General Jacob, of course, is the most well-known of the Jewish soldiers of the Indian Army. He was a legend, best known for his decisive role in the 1971 Bangladesh War, and he was born in the Baghdadi Jewish community of Calcutta in 1921. He later joined the British Indian Army in 1942, served in Iraq, Tunisia, and Burma, and when India gained independence in 1947, he continued to serve in the Indian Army. And after retirement in 1978, he was appointed as the governor of Goa and later of Punjab. General Jacob visited Israel several times, even before the forging of diplomatic relations. He was an honored guest during the 1995 opening ceremony for the Jerusalem 3000 celebrations. Over the years, he developed close friendships with late Prime Ministers Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin. He had a particular fondness for Mota Gur, the Israeli paratrooper commander whose forces captured the old city of Jerusalem in 1967. And today, General Jacob's uniform hangs in the Israeli Military Museum at Latrun. He was, of course, proud of the country he served, India. And as he said, India has always been very good to us, the Jews. And I'm a very proud Jew, but I'm Indian through and through. I was born in India and served here my whole life, and this is where I want to die. And proud as he was of his country, he was also immensely aware of his Jewish heritage. As the president of New Delhi's Judah Ham Synagogue, he was instrumental in securing critical funds for its refurbishment and also instrumental in getting Calcutta synagogues registered as national monuments. He passed away in 2016, and later his memory was commemorated with a plaque at the Ammunition Hill in Jerusalem. I had the honor of meeting General Jacob briefly when he came to present his autobiography to the Prime Minister in December 2014 at the Parliament House in Delhi. And I remember that despite his age, his faculties were as sharp as ever. There have been other Indian Jewish officers as well. Vice Admiral Benjamin Sampson, who was the first naval advisor at the Indian High Commission in London. He later went on to become the first naval officer to be appointed as the commandant of India's prestigious National Defense Academy. And after his retirement in 1966, he became the CEO of Mazgaon Dock Shipbuilders Limited. And in a rare gesture, he was promoted to an honorary rank of Vice Admiral in 1972. There was also Flight Lieutenant Lloyd Moses, who joined the Indian Air Force in 1965. And during an operational mission in the opening days of the 1971 war, he was martyred when his plane was shot down in the Western Theater near Lahore. And he too has been memorialized at the Ammunition Hill in Jerusalem. I've also heard about Lieutenant Ellis Ashton of 3rd Maratha Light Infantry, who served in the British Indian Army during the Second World War in Iraq. And after the war, he reportedly became a prominent fighter in the Haganah and was posthumously given a Medal of Gallantry by Israel. The contribution and legacy of the Jewish soldiers of Indian Army still remains an understudied subject. And several years ago, when I was posted here, I recall visiting the cemeteries of Indian soldiers in Israel, where I chanced upon some graves of Indian Jewish soldiers, especially from Bombay, in Ramleh. And I'm glad that the Center for Military History and Conflict Studies at the United Services Institution of India, under the leadership of Major General DK Sharma, has collaborated with us in this initiative. I'm also happy to hear Brigadier Ajit Apte, a veteran of 1971 war. And I appreciate the efforts of Mr. Ran Amitai, one of the speakers today, for focusing on bringing to light the stories of more distinguished contributions from the small but formidable Indian Jewish community. I wish all the participants good luck and look forward to an interesting discussion. Thank you and Toda Rabba. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'll now request the Director, USI, Major General DK Sharma, to also give his opening remarks. And before he does that, a brief introduction. General Sharma was commissioned into the Sikh Light Infantry in 1976, and he superannuated from the Indian Army in 2012. He's currently the director of the USI, which is the oldest strategic think tank in the country. It was established in 1870 and has just completed 150 years of its existence. General Sharma was conferred 3 Distinguished Service Military Awards by the President of India, and for both Distinguished Service and Gallantry. And besides, he was conferred the National Award for Nation Building by the Confederation for Educational Excellence in 2017. He's represented India at the UN as a military observer in Central America and was India's defense attaché in Central Asia. His specialization is in strategic net assessment methodology, scenario building, and strategic gaming, part of which he has visited numerous countries and attended as a member of our military delegations and presented at numerous conferences as well. He regularly participates in Track 2 level dialogue, and I'll now request General Sharma to kindly give his opening remarks. Sir.
Thank you, Rana, and with respect to Ambassador Sanjeev Singla, also the eminent panelists and other participants, we in fact are privileged to partner with our embassy in Tel Aviv to hold this very important webinar, and that too on the eve of our Republic Day. I think there couldn't have been a better occasion to commemorate and to pay tribute to this legendary son of India that General Jacob was. I don't have to talk much about USI of India. It's the oldest think tank, and we have about 15,000 members. Much of our information is available on our website, and we would be very happy to partner for more events, even on geopolitics and strategic security, with Embassy of India, and request Ambassador to link us up with some of the prestigious think tanks in that country so that we can collectively, take this strategic dialogue and discourse at Track 2 level or at the think tank level forward to further build up and strengthen our bilateral relations. Well, we have a galaxy of speakers who are going to talk about General Jacob, but I couldn't resist the temptation to pick up this letter which he had written to all the sons and daughters of India, that is just before his death. And in this letter, I'll just read, he said, I'm 93 now, a retired army journal, perhaps still wearing the old world on my sleeves on the last leg of my life. I never married. I have no family. With me, the last trace of my bloodline will forever be washed away from the face of India and this earth. I have no son or daughter, but when I think of it, I see my son and daughter in every young face of this country. You are all my sons and daughters, and hence this letter. I write to you, while I am proud to be a Jeev, I am an Indian through and through, and I ask you all to make India your prime identity. How profound. Army life has taught me the importance of duty. Stand tall, resolve to serve the nation and never waver. Our duty is to serve. You need to do what you feel is right and strive and seek and find and conquer. This is the only way to be true to your own self. What worries me most is the swarming poor of our nation. The privileged youth of our country should take ownership of the situation. I talk to the young of this nation. You're far better trained and far more professional than my generation. Sound economic and strategic planning will bring about the required change. Usher in your nation. Sons, respect women. I don't understand how crime against women can happen. I have no answers to them. I can only appeal to those willing to lend an ear. I'm finished now, but you're really the beginning. Begin with a difference. If I had married, I would have sent my son and daughter to be an army man or woman. Army life is clean, disciplined, and has purpose. I think about this career option, and you should also think about it. But bear in mind that the army life is not just song, dance, and glass of scotch. Let me tell you, my favorite drink is water, over and out, General Jacob. I think this is what inspires all of us and the coming generation. So with these words, now I hand over to Rana to take us through the proceedings of the day.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next speaker is Brigadier Ajit Apte, and he will be talking to us on the legacy of General JFR Jacob. Brigadier Apte is a second-generation Army officer, and he's an alumnus of the National Defense Academy and the Indian Military Academy, and was commissioned into the Regiment of Artillery in December 1970. Brigadier Apte has very close ties with General Jacob, as he will go on to discuss. And the Brigadier took part in the 1971 war on both the eastern and the western sectors, and he was in the battle for the liberation of Bangladesh in the Jessore-Khulna sectors. The Brigadier served in the line of control in Jammu Kashmir in 1977, and after that in the eastern sector in counterinsurgency environment. He commanded a field regiment in the run of Kutch and was artillery brigade commander of a strike corps on the Western Front during the Kargil conflict in 1999. He's been an instructor and a senior instructor at the School of Artillery and an instructor at the Officers Training Academy in Chennai. He held a variety of staff appointments and superannuated in December 2005 after more than 35 years of service in the Indian Army. Over to you, sir.
His Excellency Ambassador Sanjeev Singla, General Sharma, Foreign Leader China, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed honored today to have been requested by General Sharma to speak about the life and legacy of General Jacob Barge Raphael Jacob. He was known as Jack, it was his nickname, and Jake was his name used by his very, very dear colleagues. My father was one of his very, very dear colleagues. General Jacob and my father grew up together in the Indian Army. My father was incidentally Indian Commission Army number 469, and General Jacob was Indian Commission Army number IC 470. There is just one number next to my father. General Jacob, much has been said about him by His Excellency the Ambassador, so also by Foreign Leader China and by General Sharma. Therefore, one thing is very clear, that General Jacob is well known all over the world in the annals of military history, as well as on many media platforms, for his excellent achievement in the finest military victory of the Indian Armed Forces in December 1971. I am therefore going to dwell upon my experiences from my trove of nostalgic memories about General Jacob. I remember General Jacob from my childhood days when I was 8 years old, and that is 64 years ago. But General Jacob used to tell me that he had attended my first birthday, that was in 1950. So I accepted that fact and was very honored. I'm also going to show you some pictures and letters which I found in my father's archives. My father has gone about 27 years ago, but the pictures and letters which I found, I'm going to display them today. I've also had privy to meeting my fathers in General Jacob's battery captain and battery commander during the Second World War. But first, let's get on to understanding what was General Jacob. Next. As very correctly brought out, General Jacob was born in Calcutta in 1923. But I want to clarify one point here. The ambassador has mentioned 1921. The story I will just tell you. General Jacob was underage to join the Indian Army, and that's why he gave his age 2 years older. That's how on some platforms he's 1921, and whereas actually he's 1923. Now, he was born into a very well-to-do family. His father was a businessman, Elias, his mother Carrie. They were Baghdadi Jews. They stayed on the Loudon Street in Calcutta, and he was compelled with his two brothers, Maurice and Eric, to go to Victoria School, Kurseong, Darjeeling, into boarding. Jack was an outstanding, brilliant student. He topped in the Senior Cambridge with a 5-pointer record aggregate. He was excellent in rifle shooting. He participated in the Baker Musketry Trophy, and they won it for 3 years. Jacob, when the Second World War started, read some poets like Rupert Brooke and Sassoon, and they had been publicizing the atrocities done by the Nazis on the Jews. Jack was furious, and he decided to join the Indian Army, much against the wishes of his parents. That's the time when he increased his age, and he joined the officers training school at Bow and got commissioned on 7 June 1942. My father was commissioned into 8th Anti-Tank Regiment, but a battery of that regiment joined the Kilo Anti-Tank Regiment, which it was earlier known K Anti-Tank Regiment, which later became the 1st Anti-Tank Regiment, and had been pulled out after fighting against Field Marshal Rommel in the First Battle of Alamein, at the Battle of Knightsbridge Box, Bir Hakim, where some of our Indian units also fought. The 1st Anti-Tank Regiment was brought back into northern Iraq. They were asked to secure the pipelines because there was a possibility of Hitler coming down through those areas on towards the North African region and then coming in towards India. So that regiment was refitting in 1943 when my father, with his battery from 8th Anti-Tank Regiment, joined Jacob at Iraq. That was 1943. Along with my father was Lieutenant Shaukat Ali Raza, and they were the only 3 Indian Army officers in that otherwise British setup. Incidentally, Lieutenant Shaukat Raza rose to be a Major General and then a Lieutenant General, and he moved into Pakistan at the time of partition. But I'll mention here that during the 1971 Bangladesh War, General Shaukat Raza was commanding the 9th Pakistan Infantry Division, and General Jacob had the pleasure of meeting him because he told me this, and so did my father, and they 3 were very close chums. So Shaukat Raza definitely asked Jacob about my father, and Jacob told me much after the war, he said, I told Shaukat that Bhaiya Aapke's son was fighting against you from the 9th Infantry Division of the Indian Army. When Jacob, Shaukat Raza, and my father joined 1st Anti-Tank Regiment, here is a picture now. They, of course, fought. I'll just give you that little background. But on this picture, you see a photograph on the left. That's Lieutenant Jack Jacob sitting on the ground. The person on our right, behind him, there's an officer without an arm. The person on the right is Captain Norman Harding. In the center is Major Dick Peters, my father's and Jacob's battery commander. Colonel Lassalle was the commanding officer of 1st Anti-Tank Regiment. On the right is a letter which today is 78 years old. I picked it up from my father's archives, kind courtesy Captain, later Major Norman Harding, wherein I'll just highlight, he mentions, and it was around this time that we had 3 Indian commissioned officers to join us. Bhaiya Apte, that's my father, later retired Brigadier M.R. Apte, a Hindu. Jacob, he writes, I never quite knew what he was, but assumed him to be a Hindu. Later, I was to meet Major Norman Harding in 1995 in England. I had lunch with him, and he told me, he said, Ajit, I realized my mistake. Jacko was a Jew. I said, yes, sir. And the third one was Shaukat Ali Raza, a Muslim. Next. Now, at this point of time, the regiment had fought in Burma, Malaysia, Sumatra, Java, and right up to the Dutch East Indies. They had carried out fitment in India, having switched over from the 8th and 10th Indian Infantry Divisions on the Western Front in North Africa. They were now allotted to 26th Indian Infantry Division to fight in Arakan, Joma, Sumatra, Ramri Islands, Java, and Medan. I must quote a small incident here which my father mentioned to me, and it was corroborated by General Jacob in 1995 when I discussed this with him. When the 1st Anti-Tank Regiment landed at Karachi, they were driven down to Sialkot and Rawalpindi. My father took the column to Calcutta, and Jacob went to collect mortars which were allotted to the regiment in Jabalpur. Mortars being collected, the station master refused to have them loaded on the train. The train was the Bombay-Calcutta Mail via Jabalpur, which even runs today. Jacob went to the station master and told him, why can't these mortars be loaded? He said, I need authority. He said, whose authority do you require? He said, from the Indian Army. He said, okay, give me a piece of paper. He wrote down there, I, Captain Jack Jacob of the Indian Army, hereby authorize you to stop the train, unload the mail van, and load these mortars. Anything else you want? He said, thank you, sir. And the mortars were loaded. That was Jack Jacob for you. Later, Jack Jacob's experience in Burma, Dutch East Indies was to play a major role. I must tell you that my parents got married in November 1946. Jack Jacob attended the wedding, and that's the time when he told my father that my father and he had been selected to attend the prestigious gunnery staff course at the UK Larkhill. They left in 1946 December. They completed the course, did excellently, and were allotted as instructors gunnery to the School of Artillery. My father and Jacob were the first batch of Indian instructors gunnery to take over from the outgoing British. Later joined General O.P. Malhotra, future Army Chief, and a whole lot of others who did the next batch of courses. General Jacob and my father were responsible for the division of assets of the Indian artillery because partition took place within a month, and Brigadier Flowen, the outgoing British commandant, requested Jack Jacob and my father to complete the formalities. That is the time when General Sartaj, Lieutenant Colonel Sartaj Singh, arrived as the first chief instructor of the School of Artillery, and we had General Kumaramangalam and General Gyani taking over the reins from the British. After the partition was done, as far as Jacob is concerned, he progressed in his higher responsibilities in echelons of command. He attended the Defense Services Staff College. He was selected to do the artillery missile course in the USA, and later on rose in command. Please go back. He rose in command to raise a new regiment, 3-field regiment. He also raised a new division, that's the 12th Infantry Division, and he also incidentally raised a new corps. So he has a hat trick of achievements to establish new organizations. He wrote a lot of précis pamphlets, training pamphlets, and his hour of glory was when he was Chief of Staff of the Eastern Command. Finally, he raised 16 Corps and then headed the Eastern Army. General Jacob was acerbic but well-meaning. He was pointed, blunt, and straightforward. He could tick off senior officers or disagree with them wholeheartedly. He would brook no interference in his command, and he had absolute loyalty, which was compelling to his juniors. His penchant for a maneuver battle when he was commanding as General Officer commanding 12th Infantry Division in the desert was outstanding. In fact, he always believed in the war of mobility or the war of maneuver, which he was to apply subsequently. His troops nicknamed him our Moshe Dayan, and I later heard from General Jacob that he was greatly influenced by the excellent six-day war that was executed in 1967 during the Arab-Israel conflict. He was always sharp, ahead of his time, and he had an equilibrium of mind to function effectively in an environment of uncertainty and ambiguity. Jacob had that breadth of vision which he displayed effectively during the 1971 war. Next, please. I'll now focus on General Jacob's finest hour. Jacob was in the vanguard for conceptualization of war, its strategy, staging forward combat elements, building logistics, infrastructure, and many more things which ultimately unfolded as the war progressed. He played a pivotal role in advising the army commander, the army chief. Jacob understood the terrain peculiarities of Bangladesh or East Pakistan excellently. It was a riverine terrain, and he understood something known as expanding torrent, which was taken from Basil Littleheart in 1917, and the same system was applied, where the Indian Army actually poured like a torrent of water. If you see the arrows, we had the Indian Army on a four-pronged, multi-pronged attack. On the northwest, we had 33 Corps with 71 Brigade. In the southwest, we had my corps, that is 2 Corps. In the northeast, we had the 101 Communication Zone. And on the eastern front, we had the 4 Corps led by that flamboyant and great military leader, General Sagat Singh. Director of Military Operations was Major General Inder Gill. Jacob, Gill, Sagat, and all the corps commanders orchestrated beautifully. The army commander, of course, was at the helm of affairs, but one must understand that without the chief of staff's planning, nothing could work. Jacob capitalized on this. He also made a great contribution in advising Field Marshal or then General Sam Manekshaw at the exact point of execution of the battle, because the logistics had to build up due to the terrain conditions. He made the commanders focus on a single point mission, that is the liberation of East Pakistan and creation of Bangladesh. As you would know, there are always differences amongst senior officers and in the military leadership. It happened in the Second World War also, when Field Marshal Montgomery, Eisenhower, Patton, and Omar Bradley had their own differences. But they all combined together to liberate Europe. So also, there were some minor differences, but I think Jacob played an excellent role in getting his corps commanders to agree with what the army commander had to say and put in a word to Sam Manekshaw, and therefore have the entire system functioning. And it was a blitzkrieg action, something which I'll describe on the next slide. But I must emphasize on one thing. Pakistan's National Defense College has gone on record to mention and written that the credit of victory is to General Jacob's meticulous planning and preparations and its implementation. Next, please. Just a quick review out here. Jacob and the corps commanders and the Director of Military Operations did something what is called as jointmanship and force multiplication. It's the first time after World War II where we had the army going in on a four-pronged attack. We had an airborne assault of a battalion group at paradropping at Tangel and capturing Pungli Bridge, which was very important. This prevented Pakistan's 93 Infantry Brigade from falling back onto the gates of Dhaka and protecting it. We also ensured that no reinforcements could come in to threaten us. We also had two series of special heliborne operations. One was at Sylhet and one was across the Meghna River. Full marks to General Sagat, Corps Commander of 4 Corps, who orchestrated it excellently with the planning and execution by General Jacob and the Director of Military Operations. Let me also tell you that in the planning, there was a dummy airdrop to confuse the Pakistanis. In fact, this is exactly what confused General Niazi, and he then decided to surrender. All this took place on 11th, 12th, and 13th. But I must tell you one thing, the listeners, that there was also an amphibious assault launched at Cox's Bazar. And this later I heard from General Jacob when I would meet him when I was in Army headquarters, that he had always thought of this or what they had done in World War II. Also, General Jacob and his planning ensured that the Western Front was not kept aloof. There were plans on our eastern sector that in case the Western Front required troops, there were troops earmarked to move out from the eastern theater. Towards this, I must tell you that our medium regiment, after we captured Jessore, was pulled out. My own regiment was on air transportation orders. My battery was to be airlifted after capturing Jessore. But the fight continued at Siramani and at Kulna, so my battery continued. But the parachute brigade left the battalion group, 2nd Para, with the field battery of 17 Parafield Regiment, and jumped into Tangel. The rest of the Para Brigade was pulled out on 13th December and shifted onto the Western Front. Therefore, our planning was such, well orchestrated by Jacob, that he had even thought of that. I must also tell you here that his allocation and grouping of resources was excellent. We had armored regiments with a mix of T-55 tanks and PT-76 to take care of the terrain and riverine conditions. I think it was absolute top-class planning, and I was there on the battlefront throughout. Jacob's shaping of the battle was excellent, and that carried on till 30th November, which was Operation Jackpot. Next. I won't take too long. This is just pictorially what was achieved in creating Bangladesh. That's the famous surrender signing picture. General Jacob met General Niazi, forced him into surrender. I will not go into it because that video clip has been going around on all WhatsApp platforms. But here he is taking a rather full-on Niazi for the final surrender. Next. What was the impact of the victory that we achieved in 1971? Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was threatened to be killed by the Western Pakistan government, was freed. Indira Gandhi, our Prime Minister, was very happy. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, on his way to Dhaka, stopped at Calcutta, met General Arora and General Jacob. Begum Hasina, as a tribute and honor to General Jacob, called him, and here is Jacob receiving that great award from Bangladesh. And as His Excellency the Ambassador had already brought out, he was present when General Jacob was received by the Honorable Prime Minister and his book, Surrender at Dhaka and Odyssey in War and Peace, which he presented. I must make a mention out here, Ambassador Singla, that when the manuscript was being written by General Jacob of the book Surrender at Dhaka and Birth of a Nation, I was privy to reading the manuscripts because I was posted in Army headquarters, and General Jacob would often visit my office and call me over for a drink and dinner. So that's the time when I spent a couple of hours going through his manuscripts. So that's that. Next. Finally, the boy who was born in Calcutta rose to the highest rank and assumed command on 1st August 1974 as the Army Commander of the Eastern Army. He was given a great guard of honor by the 8th Battalion of the Brigade of the Guards. At that time, Captain Gogle, who today is a retired brigadier, was giving this honor to this general. There were only 3 important points about his Eastern Army commander's tenure. Number 1, tranquility in the northeastern states, where he got the trust between the chief ministers and the governors, and therefore that region came to a little peace. He crafted a far-sighted strategic document for the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago for long-term economic and national security needs. He mooted the idea of creating a tri-service command, which was finally accepted by the government, and today that command exists. He also suggested a strong military presence west of the Malacca Straits to enhance our military presence. As you will see on the slide, this is to prevent our adversaries filling up the vacuum in that region. And that is becoming more and more prominent now with the current imbroglio between the Indian and the Chinese forces in the eastern Ladakh and all along the front, even in Arunachal. As we are talking today, there are reports of some very minor skirmishes and clashes at a place called Nakula. So I think General Jacob's strategy was absolutely correct. General Thorak had mentioned in 1962 who possibly is our main adversary. And General Jacob also insisted on that. Undoubtedly, one of the most outstanding Jew officers of the Indian Armed Forces retired on 28 July 1978. As His Excellency the Ambassador has mentioned, there were many other Jews in the Indian Army, Navy and the Air Force. Admiral Sanson. There was also General Russell Mordecai from the Corps of Engineers. There have been some other officers also whom I know, like Brigadier Benson Daniels and Wing Commander Joseph. There are many Jews who served in the Indian Army with distinction. But undoubtedly, the most outstanding Jew officer of the Indian Armed Forces retired on 28 July 1978, and that was none less than Lieutenant General Jacob Raphael Jacob. Next. He joined the BJP in 1991. He was assured to be a little on an advisory role in foreign affairs and in defense. He took over as governor again. The ambassador has mentioned that. But his 2 distinctive achievements were maintaining the green cover in Goa. At both these places, he ensured that the wildlife sanctuaries of nearly 210 square kilometers continued and were not taken by the illegal miners in the forest area. The Goa government was unstable, and Jacob stabilized that particular government. When he came to Punjab, he was administrator also, along with governor, and he invited Narayan Murthy, set up the IT establishments. Other companies followed, and with the result that the employment avenues enhanced in the city. He conceptualized the Chandigarh War Memorial, designed by the students of Chandigarh College of Architecture, and got President Abdul Kalam inaugurated. I must make a mention here, ladies and gentlemen, that General Jacob had mooted the proposal to the government then, nearly 25 years ago, that there should be an Armed Forces National War Memorial. And it is to the credit of our Honorable Prime Minister that this happened just the previous year, but unfortunately, General Jacob could not see its inauguration. Next. As the ambassador has brought out, General Jacob was honored by Israel. His name is there with a plaque on the Wall of Honor at the Ammunition Hill. He supported strong India-Israel relations and purchase and trade of military equipment from Israel. But he was also very popular in England. Queen Elizabeth invited him, and Jacob was a distinguished guest there. Not only that, but General Jacob also went to the US, lectured there, and one of his famous lectures on military and strategy was given and delivered at the Capitol Hill. One of the US Army generals subsequently requested General Jacob whether he could use a part of his speech, and General Jacob, of course, readily agreed to that. That was Jacob's stature at the international level. Next, please. Jacob continued his association with the army. He met people right up to the officers, JSOs, and other ranks. Here you can see him saluting a nonagenarian, but he was there for the Vijay Diwas celebrations of his beloved Eastern Command. the two pictures at the bottom, I must tell you, at General Jacob's request in 1995, I did visit Major Norman Harding. That was Jacob's first battery commander and my father's battery commander. And Norman Harding, that time was about 96 years old, but he invited me for lunch. He was very fit, and I spent a lovely day with them. And they went down memory lane. I also visited the Royal School of Artillery, where my father and Jacob had trained to become qualified gunnery instructors. Jacob had one thing. Whenever he visited, I was lucky. I was Brigadier General Staff at the School of Artillery when General Jacob visited 3 times. He always detailed a liaison officer, either a captain or major. But General Jacob always told the commandant that he would like me to accompany him. When I was sitting with him, he told me, "Do you know why I've asked for you?" I said, I kept quiet. He said, "Ajit, rather than wasting a captain or major, I'd rather have you sitting with me and talking and chatting so that I can get to know what is happening in the School of Artillery, what is happening in the artillery, and what does it really require." I said, "Thank you very much, sir. I'm indeed honored." Next. He had a lot of personal collections which he has gifted to the service, artifacts, old guns. In fact, there's a pair of guns, if I'm not wrong, at the USI. There's a Jacob Gallery established in his honor. He was very fond of the Kushan 4th BC ancient history, artifacts, music, archaeological studies, cultural and education interests, geopolitics, information technology, but he was a culinary expert. I'll tell you an incident. Before the start of the 71 war, my regiment was in the Nifa, and Jacob, as Chief of Staff, visited us. He came in his PT kit to our officers' mess. None of us knew that, and he started questioning the special cook in the cookhouse. We came to know, we rushed there. General Jacob actually gave a demonstration on how to make lemon souffle, and that was absolutely classic. I have seen him playing carom with his guard when he was army commander, and that was also absolutely classic. He would always, in a party, walk to the bar and chat with the youngsters rather than being with the senior officers. That was General Jacob. I must tell you one thing here. General Jacob had a photogenic memory. And as I recall during my discussions with Lieutenant General Baljit Singh, a very outstanding gunner himself, General Jacob recited the poem Mandalay absolutely verbatim in front of him when he was serving with the general. Next, please. This is something which I must tell you. When Jacob was the Army Commander in Eastern Command, he not only restored the church into a good library, he got all the proper religious ceremonies done before the church, which was 1800 and 1700 vintage, properly decommissioned and established the command library. When he was going around, he found this statue of black marble lying in a scrap heap. He spoke to Jyoti Basu, got this transferred to the Artillery Center, Devlali, Nasik Road, where it has been installed ceremoniously at the gate. The honor given was to Field Marshal Lord Roberts, popularly known as Bobs of Kandahar, for his excellent victory and the Victoria Cross then. General Jacob knew that Field Marshal Lord Roberts was a blue-blooded master gunner and deserved much more than lying in a scrap of heap in Calcutta. Here lies today on this horse is Colonel, who also followed him to England and was laid to rest subsequently in great honor. So General Jacob, standing here with the statue, whenever he would come to Devlali, he always made it a point to come and visit this particular place. Next. Finally, I must tell you, I've had some wonderful moments with this great man, not only because he was my father's very dear friend, but to me, he was a distinguished soldier, an officer and gentleman of very high caliber. General Jacob, no doubt, rose to fame because of the 1971 war, but the man was intelligent, he was sharp. He could conduct a military music band during the reunion by taking the baton and actually getting to know if any particular musician was incorrect in his playing of an instrument. That was Jacob. I visited him a number of times in his home in Sogbihar, but before he would offer me his first drink, I had to go through a proper, well-conducted tour of his archaeological museum. Therefore, this picture was taken with the grand old man standing there. in his tie and blazer. That's a beautiful statue. He had period furniture, artifacts, paintings, documents, and memorabilia. And he gave a lot to his beloved regiment of artillery and the Indian Army. Finally, as the ambassador has already brought out, on 13th January 2016, and I happened to speak to him just 1 week before that on phone, this distinguished officer and gentleman, one of the most outstanding jewels of the Indian Army, walked into sunset that day. As a true soldier, he faded away. But as all true soldiers, they only fade away, they sleep for a little while, and then they awake into eternal living. That is what was Lieutenant General Jacob, Raphael Jacob, PVSM, one of the most outstanding and brilliant officers of the Indian Army. Thank you very much.